All right, TSL, let's get it. Welcome to another episode of The Sales Life. I'm your host, Marsh Buice. And today, man, I want to challenge you about thinking about how you handle a crisis. How have you handled crises in your life? You probably didn't handle them very well. I know in retrospect, I haven't handled them very well. And the subject of episode 663, we just made an anniversary. Happy 4-year anniversary to the Sales Life and those of you who have rocked with me for all these years. That was this is what we talked about. And so I want to bring it to life on the screen and talk a little bit about what we talked about and more so on this week's edition of the Sales Life. And if this is your first time here, man, welcome. Got a great show for you. And if you've been here a time or 10, thank you and welcome back. So this is something that's interactive as I talk. Yes, I've got a point to make because I want to get you in, get you out so that you can get on with your life, but also drop your comments below. And I'll make sure to respond to those comments and also share you some love as well. So let's get right to it. How do you handle a crisis? The only way that you are going to handle a crisis is to go through crises. It's a tough rule, isn't it? You got to go through to get to. But it's so true. And in retrospect, I was listening to Jordan Harbinger's podcast, episode 566, I believe. And he had the CEO and co-founder of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, on. And in retrospect, Brian Chesky is grateful that Airbnb was born in a crisis. See, today Airbnb is both a noun and a verb, right? We use it simultaneously. Look, we're going out of town this weekend. We're heading to Houston this weekend. Let's just Airbnb it. It's a verb now. And it's just a common way of life. But if you think back, I don't know, a decade ago, it would sound like probably one of the craziest ideas ever. Imagine if Chesky was your buddy and y'all sitting there drinking a beer and he walks up and says, "Bro, I got a business idea for you." All right, what you got? Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that you could rent out a room or a fully furnished house to others and make money. To random strangers. Dude, you think the guy was crazy. So Airbnb and Chesky's idea was like the worst, best idea ever. It started off as the worst idea. As a matter of fact, investors just ran from him. But people like Paul Graham said, "I think you're onto something." And they invested in him. And along the way, Chesky and his cohorts, they would max out credit cards just to keep the business afloat. And for 10 years, they got at it. 10 years, man, they were scrappy. And it seemed like it all paid off because they were just at the doorstep of making it big. Airbnb had a $40 billion valuation with a B. So Chesky's entire life, he's about to become major wealthy. And right when they were set to go public, the pandemic hit. And 80% of Airbnb's business was completely wiped out. And Chesky said, truthfully, I didn't know if we were going to be around to service the other 20%. And even though the pandemic was unpredictable, no one could have predicted this. And even though Chesky and everybody else, for that matter, was largely unprepared, nobody could have predicted this. Nobody was prepared for a pandemic. But he was battle tested. And Chesky realized that he had an advantage over other CEOs that were in the travel industry. See, Airbnb had been born in a crisis. Chesky was with him at birth. He pulled it out of the ashes. Worst idea. For 10 years, he tinkered, he dabbled, he doodled, he scrapped, he scraped, he maxed. He did all that. So for 10 years, he had been battle tested. Every day was a battle. So he had an advantage over the other CEOs because most CEOs, they just become CEOs. Here's the resume. You're hired for the CEO. When it doesn't work, like most times, CEOs come and go. 3 to 5 years, they're out of there. They're on to the next show. And Chesky said, I knew I had an advantage over others in the travel industry because I'd been battle tested. I had some ideas on how to lead not only myself, but how to lead others through a crisis. And it makes you think, man, for all the crises that you've been through in your life, as distasteful, as hurtful, as dark as they were, on the other side of it, you really have to say to life, thank you. Thank you for all the crises. Because for every crisis that you go through, you're battle tested and you're equipped to handle more crises as your life evolves and you move ahead. So when you're in a crisis, remember Chesky's 4 rules. Be decisive, be principally oriented, communicate often, and manage your own psychology. So let's unpack a few of these as we go along the way. The first one is you got to be decisive. And you may not like, in a crisis, you may not like any of the options. They may be all bad. It's not optimal, but it is an opportunity. So you got to be decisive. Because, see, no one wants to follow someone who's curled up in a little ball in the corner, who's not making a decision. You got to be decisive. Even if it's not the best, make one. This is what your people are gravitating to you. So pick an option, roll with it, adjust along the way. But the main thing is, get moving. That's what people need. They need some movement. You sitting there strategizing, plan after plan after plan after plan, that ain't going to go. All of them are bad decisions. All of them are bad options. Choose one of the options. Go with it. Get moving. You can always adjust along the way. Because I always say there's really not there's not a right or wrong decision. Sometimes it's the wrong timing. Maybe you didn't have all of maybe you couldn't account for everything until you made that decision. There were some things that you didn't even know about. But once you made the decision, other things unrolled and revealed themselves, and you learned more, but you would have never learned that had you not made a decision. You know, I go back, as I was thinking about that this morning, I go back 16 years ago to Hurricane Katrina. I didn't make very good decisions. I didn't lead well through a crisis during that time. But 16 years later, with Hurricane Laura, I handled it a lot better. See, I had to go through one 16 years ago and kind of get all the I had to flex my idiot muscle. I had to make some bad decisions. I had to scrape my legs. I was almost fired during that time because I was all emotional. But it set me up. It prepared me for the next one that came. Damn, dude. 2 decades later. See, that's the thing. When you're going through crisis, you never know how it's going to prepare you and when it's going to prepare you. Like for me, there were some things that I've gone through in life that I didn't encounter something similar to it until a decade later. You may encounter it 5 hours later, 5 years later. But whatever, when you lean into these things and you handle these 4 rules, be decisive, be principally oriented, communicate often, and manage your own psychology, you're going to be able to navigate the waters better. The second one, in handling a crisis, Chesky's rules, Airbnb, be principally oriented. And here's what principles are. Principles are what you believe to be true. These are your non-negotiables. What do you know that you know that you know? It's not that you're inflexible, but you have some first principles that you know to be true. And so you live to those first principles. You lead through a crisis through those first principles. And Chesky, as he was creating the principles to become principally oriented, leading through this crisis where 80% of Airbnb's business was totally wiped out. They were just about to go public, and now all of a sudden they're wiped out. $40 billion valuation. They were spending, I think, $300 million a month. They were hemorrhaging money. About to go down in flames. So he's principally oriented. And Chesky, as he was creating the principles, he asked himself, how do you want to be remembered if this all goes down? Do you want to be remembered as the one who fought? Or do you want to be remembered as a leader who folded? The third key rule when you're in a crisis is you got to communicate early and often. You don't have to have all the answers. It's not about that. But leading through a crisis, you need to show that you have a plan. So this means that you have to communicate early and often. This means that you have to be seen, that you have to touch your people early and often. Don't go don't go huddle up in your office and come out when the smoke clears. No, you be out there, shoulder to shoulder, encourage them. As a matter of fact, you got to check their pulse. You got to check in with them. How are they doing? It's why you're a leader. They're looking at you. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Got it. I am too. Let's go. We'll be scared together. But damn it, if we're going to be scared, we're going to be moving forward as we're scared. So you got to take your people's pulse. Check this out. If you go to the emergency room, you'd be bleeding. What's the first thing they're going to do? Check your vitals. Before they do anything, they're going to check your vitals. Assess, check the vitals, and then they're going to get you well. Same thing. You got to check your people's vitals. You got to check their pulse. You're in a crisis, man. They're scared. The fourth thing, Chesky says, is the most important, and I got to agree with him. The fourth thing in handling a crisis is you got to manage your own psychology. People don't need a soup, and they don't need a stone. Your people don't need you to be a soupy mess, and they don't need you to be stone cold either. Unemotional. Knuckle up. You got to toughen up. People don't need that. So this is why it's important when you're in a crisis to manage your own psychology. You got to regulate that. You got to be somewhere in between. And you can't snap. You can't go off. And you can't just go all stoic either. My default setting when I'm in a crisis is to go very stoic. I'll go very cold because I have to figure things out. I don't let my emotions fly out of control. But I also have to temper that because while I don't let my emotions fly out of control, it's also important for me as well to not be so stoic that my people cannot get a read on me. See, your people, as you pass by, as you're handling things, as they're floundering around because this is a crisis, your people are looking at you saying, what's he doing? And it's important when you manage your own psychology, it's important that you regulate it in such a way that not only is productive for you, but it's also going to be productive for them as well because they are going to do what you do. In closing, we got to get out of here. We got some crises to handle. Here's the thing, man. In a crisis, leaders aren't made, they're revealed. Chesky and his team pulled through. Airbnb is still standing, and they went public. And so when a crisis comes, Chesky's ready because he's battle tested. Are you? See, you got to go through to get to. You got to go through the valleys to get to the summits. And the only way that you're going to reach the summit is the way that you handle a crisis. Let me know how your progress is going. Be sure and connect to me at marshbuice.com. That's MARSHBUICE. It's like juice with a B in front. There you will find almost 700 episodes of the Sales Life podcast. If you're in a podcast, top right-hand corner are all the links where I hang out on all the socials. Connect to me. I'd love to see you there. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is a microphone. And that microphone is for you, where you can leave me a voice message. You don't even have to identify yourself. Leave me a voice message and let me know what's going on in your life, how I can help you. And also, if you have any future show ideas, books to read, I'm no hair, but I'm all ears. I'd love to hear from you. So with that, let's get out of here. Remember, the greatest sale that you will ever make is to sell you on you, because you're more than enough. Thanks for sharing today's episode. Thanks for supporting the Sales Life for 4 years. And we're just in the warm-up show. Stay amazing. Stay in the Sales Life.